Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Rage for PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Mac. This is a first-person shooter by id Software that was released in 2011, and it was actually 7 years after the last game they developed, which was Doom 3, and that was released in 2004. Between then, you had some basically re-releases of older games, but you didn't actually have any new games developed by them. And this is a completely new IP from id, so we didn't really know what to expect from it. I mean, it was promising from the very beginning, especially considering the technology that was going into this thing. It is on the new id Tech engine, and so that is something to keep in mind. It is kind of a technical marvel in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you can't get fully caught up in all the technical stuff. I mean, Crysis had that problem. It was really good on the technical side of things, but as a game, it wasn't really that good. So that's really the question with Rage. Was it one of those games where it ended up being a good game in addition to the technical aspects being really high-end? Or was it a problem where the technical aspects were the forefront and the game itself suffered for it? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it really does try to show off the new id Tech engine, and they actually did a really good job with it for the most part. That said, everything is brown and gray, and that's to be expected. I mean, it is a post-apocalyptic wasteland kind of thing. But still, I'm so sick of seeing brown and gray as everything. And they do try to throw in some other colors in there as well, some bright colors and such like that. But it really doesn't help the whole thing in the long run. And it looks like a kind of an upgraded version of Doom 3 in terms of its graphics. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Doom 3 still looks decent. But in this case, the textures are sharper for the most part, the modeling is better, the animations are way better. The animations are actually pretty good in this game for the most part. It's got this nice kind of sci-fi art style to it it's somewhere between what you'd expect from a kind of a modern post-apocalyptic setting and this futuristic setting where you've got this nice intermixing of the two. And so it does come across as a fairly unique art style. That said, it does remind you a little bit of Borderlands in terms of its art style. It's just, that's the way some things look, and it's kind of unfortunate, actually, because that is one of the things that this game does get compared to a lot is Borderlands, and I'll get to that more later on, but anyway. So, the visuals themselves are high quality, but there are some issues. Of course, the colors being one. The other being that on PC, there is horrendous pop-in. And what I mean by that is when you're loading textures, you'll see things that pop in on occasion. And this is one of the more noticeable things about Unreal Engine 3 and the older versions of it. You would notice where textures would start out really, really blurry. And then over time, as it loaded things in, then you would actually get that texture become sharper and such like that. Well, that happens in this, but it happens on the fly because this game was designed for consoles. And while streaming textures is fine for consoles, and it works okay because your movement speed is slower, the view as such is toned down a bit. On PC, when you have those fast mouse movements, it's really, really noticeable. So you'll be moving, and all of a sudden you'll be looking at this landscape of really, really blurry textures that suddenly all of them pop in as sharp, and it's kind of a pain, really. And part of why they did that was to keep the performance really high, because the visuals are pretty impressive from a technical standpoint, from a quality standpoint, but when you have that pop-in, it really takes you out of the experience quite a bit. Now, that isn't to say that the whole presentation is like that. Like I said, it's just that one issue with the texture pop-in is what really kind of kills the visuals. That and the colors being really bland and uninteresting. The sound design, on the other hand, is just really, really well done. The weapon sounds are all nice and beefy and concussive, and when you're firing the shotgun, for instance, it sounds powerful. And when you're firing the sniper rifle, it sounds powerful and stuff like that. In addition, the voice acting is well done. Each character has their own styling to them, and they're all played very well for the most part. There are a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, they've done a really good job with the voice acting. And then there's the music, which is just kind of there. You really don't notice it much. It's just kind of generic music. So they didn't really do a lot with that. But the sound effects themselves, they've just done a really good job with, especially the weapon sounds and the environmental stuff. They really did a lot with ambiance in this game. But it's not really the presentation or the technical aspects that matter. It's the gameplay and the storyline. And the story in this one is like typical id stuff, which is not very good. The idea is that this asteroid's plummeting to Earth, so this program is initiated where people are thrown into these machine things called arcs, and they're put into cryosleep, and they're infused with nanites, so they're basically better than human. And so when all the danger's over, they're supposed to actually emerge from the arcs and basically rebuild humanity. And you wake up about 100 years later and find that the world is still a wasteland, and it's become a pretty savage place. And the plan actually hasn't come to fruition, so you're kind of left without a purpose. And you conveniently have amnesia and never say anything. So, yeah, kind of tropes of the genre, huh? Anyway, what ends up happening is you get found by this guy who brings you back to his settlement and allows you to basically learn what the world is around you, and you find out that there's this faction called the Authority who are very technologically advanced and very oppressive, and they're trying to round up all the Ark survivors, and for some purpose that they don't explain very well, especially not until later on. But the idea here is that you're going to be going on various jobs, and eventually you'll find that there's actually a storyline to this game, yes. And you find that out basically in the last 2 hours of the game. I'm not joking. That's seriously what happens. You find out there's a story toward the end of the game, and up until then it's just a bunch of disjointed jobs. And so it's kind of weird how that works out. I mean, in some ways like that, it's like Borderlands, where you really don't notice that there's a storyline until you occasionally get glimpses of it here and there. In this one, you don't even really get that there is a storyline until pretty late in the game. So that's kind of a problem. It makes the whole game feel kind of disjointed, and when you're got this game where it's a hub-based FPS where there's a lot of side quests and stuff like that, although the side quests themselves are pretty generic stuff, it doesn't really bode well for your game. There's not a cohesive narrative to really pull through. And what ends up happening with the storyline is the ending is very abrupt. It feels like it was just blatantly tacked on, and in addition to having that suddenly a storyline late in the game, it just feels disjointed, and you ultimately end up losing interest, especially considering there aren't that many characters in this game that are actually very interesting. There are a few here and there, but for the most part, the characters are just kind of there, and they're pretty generic. So that's a bit of an issue. But it's not really that matters. It's mostly the gameplay, because this is a hub-based first-person shooter, and it is from id Software. They do have a lot to live up here. And one of the big things about id is that their shooting mechanics have always, except for Doom 3, just felt smooth as silk. If you've played Quake 1 through 3 or Doom 1 and 2, you know this for a fact. It's just each weapon seems to have its own purpose, and it all fits together very nicely. You do get a decent variety of weapons in this game. You get 9, and they actually have separate ammos as well. So, say you're using your shotgun, for instance, you get normal buckshot, but you also get pulse rounds, which basically mini EMPs, and you also get pop rockets, which are basically grenades. So you do get various types of weapons that do have different functions, and so there is quite a bit of variety there, and it is greatly appreciated. There is an iron sight mechanic in this game, but it's pretty toned down, and it doesn't really matter. You don't really need it that much. It is helpful sometimes, but that's mostly for long-range shooting. You don't really need it otherwise. And this variety of weapons would be much, much better, though, if there wasn't the pistol, which I'll get to in a moment. But let me go over the rest of this game first. So you have this decent variety of weapons. It does allow you to select them much the same as you would in an old school FPS, which is by the number keys, and you can just pick up any one at any time. You don't have a loadout that you have to switch out, so that's greatly appreciated. There's also an inventory system where you just pick up loot as you go along, and you'll find different items that you can use to craft new items and such like that, like ammo or stuff like wing sticks, which are basically bladed boomerangs that you throw at enemies, and They require quite a bit of skill to use effectively, just because you have to get used to how they maneuver and such. But they're kind of cool, and so when you're using these things, you just get this nice sense of satisfaction when you take down enemies with them. There is a variety of equipment that you can use that's more than just those wing sticks. You also get grenades, which you'd expect, as well as other items that you'll be using later on in the game, which are kind of cool. Buffs and so on and so forth. There are upgrades that you can purchase for your character and your vehicles as well. You can get better armor and stuff like that. But the way they've decided to do the vehicles in this game is kind of weird. When you actually own a vehicle, you have to have race certificates in order to actually buy any new parts for them, which is stuff like armor or better tires or stuff like that. But the way you get those race certificates is, of course, by racing or by taking out bandits out in the world around you, and you'll get like one at a time, I believe. So you get those by returning to this person at the bar who will just pay you for it. But here's the thing: when you have this driving mechanic stuff that they really do kind of just shove down your throat, because they make you race at several points in this game, and they also make you drive from basically everywhere in the game world, so it just gets really annoying with that. But the problem I had with it was, at least on PC, the controls for the driving are kind of wonky. I'd end up getting turned around very, very easily and just spin all over the place, never really be able to lock onto my enemies and such like that. So the vehicle combat in this game is pretty poor, and you really notice that the controls themselves are kind of meant for console right there. You also notice it very badly in the menus, where when you're running around in the world, you do have some mouse acceleration, but it's really kind of toned down. In the menus, suddenly your mouse moves really, really fast and such like that, and it's awkward. So you have to get used to that, and it really just blatantly speaks of console gaming. Not to mention there is a lack of options available for your graphics and such like that. Anyway, the open world-ish aspects of this game basically consist of you being able to go to various places, maybe find some loot that you'll need, or that you don't need really, and doing side quests. And these side quests are basically go here, shoot stuff, the end. That's it. And so it really isn't much other than just a first-person shooter that happens to be hub-based. And I get the feeling like they didn't really think this through, because the side quests are kind of boring, and the racing mechanics are boring. I mean, I've never liked racing in any game ever, so why would I like it in this? And on top of this, you have weapons that basically break the game. Now, keep in mind, you can craft all these different items. You can craft things like wing sticks. You can also craft different ammo types. The ammo type for the pistol that you can get basically 3 extra things. You can get kill bursts, which just fire a large number of bullets. You can get fat boys, which are just more powerful pistol rounds. And then you can get fat mamas, which are the most powerful ammo type in the entire game. As in, you have this little dinky pistol that suddenly kills almost everything in one hit. I am not joking. It kills almost everything in one hit, except for bosses and power armored enemies, which it takes like 2 to 5. That's it. That's all you need are the Fat Mama ammunition. Because once you get that, you can just wipe the floor with everything. Doesn't matter what else you're using. That sniper rifle, nope, you can do more with the Fat Mamas. The pulse cannon, nope, do more damage with the Fat Mamas. Yes, pulse cannon, which has BFG rounds. Yes, BFG. You know, the thing from Doom that annihilated everything. The Fat Mama ammunition for the pistol is better than that. It doesn't make any sense. So, you've got this one thing that kind of ruins the whole game. And all the other weapons by that point are just dwarfed by this thing. Particularly the assault rifle, which becomes very useless very early. Which you wouldn't think it would, because it's an assault rifle. You'd think that'd be more powerful. But it's actually pretty weak. Now, the other weapons aren't so bad. I mean, they each have their own uses, like the crossbow, for instance, is a good stealth weapon, stuff like that. The shotgun is ever useful. You can upgrade weapons as you go along. You can get different ammunition for them. But ultimately, you're going to result to the pistol loaded with fat mamas because it's just so ridiculously powerful. It even does more damage than the explosives in this game. It doesn't make any sense at all. But ultimately, what ends up happening is because of that, because of all the driving, and because of everything ending up as this very, very, very linear kind of dungeon thing going on, where you'll go in your semi-open world where it's really just a bunch of paths, and you'll get to your destination, and it will be this very linear kind of thing, where you just go from point A to point B, you do whatever, you slaughter every enemy in your way, and then you might get the thing, and then you go back. So the game ends up just being extremely tedious. It's just go here, do thing, return. Go here, do thing, return. And you're doing the same exact thing every single time, which is to say, you go to insert location here, and you either get an item, or you basically flip a switch, and you come back. That's it. And so the game ends up being extremely monotonous with that. The story does nothing to help this at all. And ultimately, you just end up not caring. And that's a real shame, because there was a lot of potential that this game had. It could have been really, really good if they had cared to actually put focus on the gameplay and not the technology. Which, on PC, of course, ends up not being that impressive. The technology aspect of this game was really noticeable for consoles, where it does look really good. But on PC, because you have that texture pop-in issue, because you have it being very consoleized, even though it does run really well, it's still just, it feels mediocre. And it's an extreme disappointment, because id Software is one of the greats. They created some of the best FPSs of all time. And it's just sad to see what they've become now. I mean, you've got this game where the single player is just this mess where it just ends up being extremely boring, extremely tedious. It's not that long either. It just feels really long. It's something like 8-ish hours. I mean, I was playing this on the hardest difficulty too, and it was still pathetically easy. But it's sad because you've got this campaign that's so pathetic, and then you've got multiplayer that's even more pathetic because it not only is peer-to-peer and matchmaking, but it's basically just mission co-op or racing. There's nothing in between. And so there's so much potential that this game had, all of it squandered. And it's a real shame, because I really hope that id can bring themselves up out of this, but it's just sad. And that's why it gets a 2 out of 5. Thanks for watching.